Yeah. So anyway, the reason I wanted us to meet is because we normally come to my class to have this session with the students. But now that we can't, we live in Corona times. So I was thinking that we would do this virtually, where the three of us would have a conversation about two things. The two of you bring these two things to the table. My students have heard a lot from me about social justice, about critical literacy, about differentiated instruction, about phonic awareness, all that stuff. But they haven't heard from you guys about different angles to this. So with you, Rashad, one of the things you do is you bring a very, you bring in a book, but the book also has messages of social consciousness and self-awareness that are very critical in the characters. And my students need to see that and understand that Earth can participate in this emancipation of self and other.
Definitely.
Yeah, and Eric, you got like a ton of experience, and you got Teacher of the Year. Did you?
Woo!
I know.
Didn't see it coming.
My student emailed me. One of my students from the class that you guys visited is one who emailed me and said, I was driving outside the school and I saw that the teacher who came to our class, Eric, he got this award. I saw it. And then I said to her, take a picture for me. And she didn't, but that's when I emailed you and I said to you, congrats.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't expecting this. There's times when I don't know, I'm just being myself, but there's times where I'm not into awards per se, but there's a couple of times I thought if I would have got an award, I should have got it, and I didn't. And this time I wasn't looking for it.
Like now late.
Right, when you get it, they're like, oh, okay, I got it. Okay, fine. Yeah, that's the thing. Teaching, we don't teach for awards anyway.
Right, absolutely, right.
We teach to teach. So that's all good. But this is great that I'm speaking to a Teacher of the Year. So, and my students will benefit from your insights, and I'll be asking you some of the questions that we have been discussing in class and everything. And Rashad, you're going to record it on your end so that.
Yes, I've got it recording.
Oh, you got it recording right now?
Yep.
Oh, good. So okay, so we can go ahead.
A lot of stuff. I didn't say that. Rashad said it. Put it up.
I'll cut out the juicy stuff.
Yes.
I keep saying it to believe it. You know.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was thinking that we could start off by having. I'll start with you, Eric. Introducing yourself, and this is a group of students. There's 16 students that have never met you before. So introducing yourself and kind of saying who you are, what you teach, and that kind of thing.
Hi, my name is Eric Thomas, and it's a pleasure to meet you virtually. I've been teaching for 21 years, mostly in 4th grade, but I've been in like 3 different school districts. I believe that teaching is a calling for me, not necessarily a job. I'm responsible for making sure the next generation is even better than the one before it. And in terms of, not just in terms of understanding a curriculum, but understanding their purpose in the world. And I think teachers should also, in addition to teaching students how to take care of themselves, how they can have an impact on a world that's going to be needing their leadership once they inherit it from the previous generation.
Yeah, that's really great. And you bring a lot of experience. Yeah, and you bring a lot of experience. My students are mainly, and we've talked about demographics before in my class, so they'll not be surprised to hear this, but my students are mainly white and middle class and female, and that's the general demographic of teachers in the United States.
Right.
And being white and female and middle class in and of itself is not a bad thing. But what happens is when someone is not able to connect with the students, then that's something that maybe impedes good teaching. And so later on in this, I'd want for you to give advice on in what ways do you think up-and-coming teachers who are like white, middle class, and female, or even male, of course I got male students in my class as well, how can they make the connection with students who are different, who see the world in different ways than they do, and things like that. So I'll come back to you, Eric. So Rashad.
Yes.
Why don't you also start by introducing yourself and saying who you are. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm Rashad Malik Davis. I am an author and an illustrator based out here in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. So my work focuses primarily on, and I'm also an educator as well. So when I'm not creating books, I go to art centers and teach, and I'm teaching online currently too. So my work focuses primarily on three things, I would say, and it's empathy, emotional literacy, getting kids comfortable with verbalizing their emotions and expressing them, and three, cultural diversity and inclusion. So I created a book series called Carefree Like Me. Both books have won the Best Indie Book Award for, the first one was for writing, and the second one, and the second one, thank you. And the second one won for the illustration. So I love it. I love being able to teach kids and getting them excited about the world around them too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Can you show us the book? Can you hold the book up?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So I have chapter 1. Chapter 2 is somewhere floating around in my house, but so this was my freshman entry into creating books, and it was a ton of fun. So I love it.
Yeah, the one thing I see about these books is the illustrations are just amazing. I mean, I look at the way you use color and you create these worlds. And I've actually, when I visit your website, I see other scenarios that are not in the books the two books. So you seem to have this flair for creativity and creating possible worlds and different things like that. So, and I think creativity and imagination are actually very necessary as media for learning for students. So students need to be creative. They need to imagine. They need to have the ability to see self and other and worlds and possibilities and things like that. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why I particularly love fantasy, and especially fantasy featuring people of color and different minority groups, because I think the ability to imagine yourself in a situation that's beyond what you're currently in. Is powerful, and even if it's you riding a dragon or you fighting ninjas, it gives your brain an opportunity to imagine yourself away from potential trauma that you might be going through. It's a way to get out of a situation and then imagine more of yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's actually good. So going back to Eric. This is just going to be a back and forth, and the questions are not necessarily going to be connected, but I'm sure there's a logic in here somewhere. So, Eric, going back to that question I was asking you, the teaching workforce has been characterized as mainly white, female, and middle class. And one of the things that we want teachers to do is to be able to connect with students so that they can guide them and they can work with them. And some of the ways I've spoken to students in my class is having books that have some representations, like the books that Rashad produces. And these books have got the representation, they've got other words, they kind of make people to extend their understanding of possibility and things like that. But besides that, or maybe even in addition to that, what do you think are some ways that students who are different ethno-racially and linguistically, how do you think they can connect with students who are different from them?
That question of connection, you can look at it in a lot of ways. You can look at it in terms of a human component, connecting with a student who you can make laugh, who you can make think critically. There's a way you can connect with them just on the curriculum itself. Culturally, that is something that they would have to look into. If you were to take me, I consider myself an African American, but if you took me a certain part of Africa, I would still know that I'm American. And it's about that particular area that I know I'm not accustomed with. And I would have to understand the area, the culture, the demographic, everything before I go there. I want to understand the culture before I teach within that culture. I want to understand it. I want to appreciate it. I want to respect it. And then I want to open up whatever I have to offer to the students that are before me. but the main thing if I was telling one of your students is that student is going to perceive you a certain way, and a depository of knowledge. You're going to have to connect with them in terms of their letting them know they have the ability to do whatever you're teaching them.
Yep.
And then you can connect there. They're not going to even, they will see that you're European, that you're from Caribbean or whatever, but they also see that you're connected to them eternally. And that is the first place you want to connect with them in terms of teaching, that you value them, and they're going to pick that up before you pick up anything. Do you value me? And they're going to pick that up before anything else that you do. And I hope that answers the question. But they just try to connect with them on that level first.
Yeah, there's a human level that one wants to connect.
Absolutely.
In fact, when I was talking to my students at the beginning of this semester, and I asked them the question, what kinds of dispositions does one think that students care about and value? They made a list of some of the dispositions that teachers would care about and value. And it turns out that many of the things they were writing have to do with being respectful, being understanding, being supportive and flexible, and all those things. They're not talking about teachers should have 10 degrees or 2 degrees and so on. Listening to students, being attentive, being approachable, and that kind of thing. And I feel that this is part of what you're talking about when you talk about
it's a good list.
The connection. It's the human connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, Rashad, do you feel that your books contribute to this understanding of the human aspect of people?
I think so. I think the greatest compliment that I've received and consistently receive is when a parent will tell me that either my child felt like they saw themselves in your book. A parent reached out to a friend of mine, because a friend had suggested the book to her, and she sent her an emotional text message and was like, I really just have to thank you and Rashad, because my son, who is half black and half white, he looked at a mirror and said, oh my God, mommy, it's me. Like, I can see me. And I was like, what?
Oh, wow.
Nice. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's incredible. So to know that something I made up in my own head and took a risk and put out into the world is impacting people like that is really huge. And with the human connection, like for myself, I didn't realize how enriching this would be for myself too. So my second book, I wrote about the Aztecs and had to understand a lot about the cultures of Mexico. And, I really had to reach out to people from that community and say, hey, you don't owe me anything. I don't know you, but like, I would love to connect with you so I can understand more. And I ended up connecting with an Aztec dance troupe, and they came.
Oh, wow.
And
that's right. I saw that.
Right.
They were fantastic.
They were amazing. And, we were speaking on the phone, and as we were talking, I was speaking with Edward, who is the host of the dance troupe. I said their indigenous name instead of the colonized name that they received. And he said, just the fact that our tribal name means so much to me, and like, whatever you want to charge, just like, that's fine. We'll come and we'll do this for you. And I said, whoa. Okay. So to know that I'm helping other people, but helping myself to learn about the world around me and the people around me and why they're awesome is huge. So I think that the book does that and more for people as well.
A book should have the same effect as a good song,
Right.
Like, hey, we're humming it, we can connect with it. All right, so get that Grammy.
Time to get that Grammy.
Right, so it's great that a child picked that up, because you touch in your heart.
Right.
And of any, you never know. It's like what you get from it, and that's great.
Thank you.
So Eric, if I may sort of come to you, do you use books like the ones we are looking at? Because we are now looking at Rashad's 2 books, Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Do you use this kind of books in your class? How do you use them if you do?
In terms of our district is pretty scripted.
Yes.
Although I do use what they call reach time. Reach time is like a 45-minute time where I can use that time. This is how I use it anyway. I'm not sure if I'm using it right, but but I use that time. Once I have an assessment where my students are academically, I use that time to tutor. And Mondays we have goals for the week, and I'll use a book to talk about, to launch a conversation about in that 45-minute time before they go to their special. And then after they come from their special, then I do writing, I do reading, math, so on and so forth. But during that reach time, to me, that's the most important time of my day, because I can establish where I can establish what I want to set for myself and for them, and whatever they want to set for themselves. And I will use a book to launch a discussion. And I do want my students up on current affairs too, but I might bring up something that happened within reason, because I'm dealing with 9 and 10-year-olds. You know, I'm not going to talk about the G7 or should Russia be in there or not. But I would talk about stuff that they surround their area that could have a global ramifications. But I used a book by Jackie Robinson about testing the ice. I can't remember the name of it, but it's about taking chances. The illustrations were shot as an artist you would love. I used a book on Hank Aaron. Then I use Malala. I can't say her last name, but she was the youngest to win a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yousafzai.
Right. Yeah. Never saying I would practice it and then get it right and get in front of kids, I blow it. But then I would take an excerpt from her autobiography and use that, talk about, well, what do you think about girls not being educated throughout the rest of the world? Do you think girls are being shunned away from the sciences? Things like that. And then we'll have conversations, you know. So I would use a book like Rashad's or books like that that will talk about their feelings and their aspirations. And hopefully I'll get them to write, and then they'll share and then they'll share their thoughts. Because using an author like Rashad or somebody else like that to get the kids to write, I can also tell them the importance of why we're learning how to write, you know?
Yeah. So at the beginning of your answer, you said something, and then you kind of moved away to talk about how you navigated. And you said something about the situation is prescriptive, but then all these other things that you're doing.
What we have to do.
Right? Yeah. So I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about you as a teacher who has worked for some time and you know your way around the teaching. How do you navigate and find your way to not be limited by the scriptedness?
Because I bring who I am to the script. It's like an actor. It's like an actor. Like, all right, Rashad, let me see you read this. All right, Eric, you read this. I like Rashad's version better. You know, and I'm going to take that script and then and put myself in it. And so, like, for instance, if I'm reading Writing Freedom, that's a novel, historical fiction. I can't remember the author's name right now. But since I have students on all different reading levels, I would read it to them. But Eric is boring, but Sir Isaac James is not. So I'll get my harmonica out and I'll start reading it, and the kids are engaged. I'm in his character, but this is being extreme because my point is I'm bringing who I am to the script. And even when I'm doing math with them, that's scripted. There's games and stuff like that. But I'll create something where I will make a word problem. Still, because a lot of times my students can do the algorithms and they can do the equations, but you put in a word problem where because I always try to make a connection between whatever we're doing, the reading skills, the writing skills, even into the math. I will find a way to make sure it's connected, so they think that it's not something that's separate. No, even when I'm thinking, even not to digress too much, but when I'm teaching them division, I'll immediately show them a fraction. That's it. Like I said, was 20 divided by 4. And I'm saying you get 1/4 of it, and then I'll throw that in. And so when I move to fractions, they already know when I was talking about division, I was also talking about fractions. They don't see it as separate. And I don't want them to see the reading separate from the math. I want them to have math literacy as well in terms of like getting understand a word problem. So I'll use the script, but I'll see what can I do with it, because I always think of myself, if I were 9, how would not only think like a 9-year-old, but what kind of classroom would I want to go to if I were 9? So I look forward to going there. But I was man, I gotta come to school. Rashad, Dr. B, one of the highest compliments a parent ever got me. I got my share of compliments, but this one I will never forget. Out of anything I've said, is that a student did not want to be sick because he didn't want to miss my class. And that's like, what? Because I always try to get out of school myself. It hurts here, Mom. I can't write right-handed. You're still going. You know, I had to be like, Mom would not let me miss school for nothing. You know, and I was trying to get out of it. When a kid said that, when a parent told me that their child did not want to miss my class. I can't get a better compliment than that.
That's huge.
That's huge. That's powerful. So, switching to you, Rashad, how do you bring yourself to your work? Because Eric is talking about this very interesting sort of motto or ethos, bringing yourself to your work and kind of being your authentic self. Do you find that you're able to do this with the genre that you have picked, which is children's stories with the images and the image and text kind of synergy that you have?
Yeah. So, you know, I think, like Eric said, I would say that being comfortable with myself really was like the start of this journey. So, you know, me going into my books and into my career as an artist really came from a tough place for me. I was going through a really tough time, and I said, I need something that will heal me. I need to get it right, you know, for myself. And then I realized that working with kids brought me joy. And you know, I realized that I could kind of merge my love for creation and storytelling and working with children into this career. So I think showing up authentically to myself first was the first step. And then everything else that I've done, career or otherwise, has really been an extension of being authentic to myself. So, you know, when it comes to my writing and my artwork, I always pour bits and pieces of myself into it because it feels real. And people are very sensitive to when something isn't real. And kids especially, that they'll call you out. They'll be like, you know, like that doesn't feel right. Like that's weird. And I love that about them.
Yes.
And you know, when I'm also doing my live readings and my talks and all that kind of stuff, I just go in as authentic me. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm a weirdo who loves this stuff, and if you're a weirdo too, that's great. And the kids love it because they realize that they can be them because I'm being me. And I love to do voices like Eric. I think doing the voices.
He does good voices too. He made me want to stop doing voices after hearing him. I'm not following Rashad. No. No, I just read.
No, we're voice connoisseurs. You need them. It makes it fun. And so, you know, the same thing with my performing books is like I show up as me. And the people who receive it well, it was meant for them. And the people who don't receive it, it wasn't meant for them. And that's okay too.
Yeah. There's also another level of bringing yourself to your work, Rashad. The characters of Amir and Nina. Those characters, say something about them, because I think you connect with them in a certain very personal way.
Definitely. So Amir and Nina are literally me and my best friend Nina of 21 years. So it's funny because I'm working with Nina and my friend Adrian. We're doing a pilot episode script to send off to a network to see if it'll get picked up for an animation. And writing the characters, it's so funny because Amir is literally me. He lives through his heart. He lives through his feelings. Like he deals with the world through his heart only. And then Nina is very logical. She's like, does that make sense? Why? Like, forget emotions. Like, what is it? Does that make sense? And that's how my best friend and I operate in the real world, and we complement each other. So in the story, they save each other in those moments where they have those weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
When Amir is too emotional, Nina comes in and is like, okay, calm down. And then when Nina is too logical, Amir comes in and is like, okay, feel your way through it. And that's how they help.
Yeah. Interesting. Actually, the turning point in chapter 2, the second book, where Amir puts himself into this blundered situation. I don't know if you had thought about it, but he is going to fall off. And then Nina just kind of goes and yanks him out of trouble and saves him.
Exactly.
So that kind of illustrates what you're talking about here.
Right. And,
Yes.
and it's just like real life, because whenever I'm like off the deep end with my feelings, Nina's like, okay, come back.
Come back here. Yes. Yeah, that's interesting.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
One of the things you started talking about, Eric, is this whole notion of what you're doing in the classroom and how you see yourself as a teacher, extending your role outside of the classroom, which segues into the place where I was asking Rashad just before you joined, where did we stop? And the last question I asked was exactly what you're answering. It was a question on how do you as a teacher find yourself needing to extend yourself beyond the four walls of the classroom so that you are effective? An effective teacher can't just say, they come into my room and they teach, and that's it. Focus on the test, focus on the standards, focus on statistics and that kind of thing, and I'm done with them. That's not a good teacher. So what you're talking about is pretty much taking us back to where we kind of stopped last week when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
So
Rashad is an extension of that, bringing an author, artist into the classroom. I don't want the students to think that all the knowledge has to come through me. And I don't always think that I can reach a child. When I was at Cadwalla Elementary School, I was the only male teacher in the classroom.
Wow.
And I understood my role. And sometimes the principal understood that, and other colleagues knew that. And they would send a boy to me, and not only because it got on their nerves, but they knew that they might have needed me.
Right.
And I knew that as well. I knew that I was limited too. There's sometimes I can't teach a girl how to be a woman. So I would send a girl to be mentored by another colleague of mine in the building. One of the things that I did beyond the classroom was, and some of those stories, but on Fridays, Nicole Bethea and myself, Nicole was a classroom across from me, we would take turns. I would watch her class, and she would take the girls and show them how to carry them, conduct themselves. And I would watch her class, and she would take all the girls in her classroom with our principal's permission, because she understood that we had to do more than that. And this was every Friday. And actually, I think she did that on Thursday, and Friday I had the boys, and she would watch my class. I would bring different people in the classroom to talk to my boys, and if I couldn't get a speaker, then we would have a topic and we would talk about it. And then it got to the point where I didn't have to lead the conversation. And the boys would talk about what their role is, what they see in the community. And then that was, we did that once a week. And then during one Women's History Month, and you saw me, Dr. B, bring a poster of the girls and all these women that I had. I asked you what you wanted to be. Remember that poster?
Yeah.
I had all these women. That was a weekly thing that we did. And then with the boys, I had a bunch of men come in at the end of the school year, and we had a little dinner and everything else, and we talked about goals and stuff like that. But like I said, bringing Rashad into my classroom is let the kids see what the possibilities are. I'm not the only one who can show them the way. It's all like the African proverb, it takes a whole village to raise a child. Rashad was a very good, important part of that village.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you for including me.
No, it was man, you were great. You were awesome. You're celebrity of the Parkway. You know that. My art department after you.
Parkway is my second home, man. I love Panthers all day. Woo woo.
Yeah. You gotta understand your community in which you're working and see what can I do to make an impact besides what I can do in the classroom. And there's people like my cousin is they don't use the word warden, but he's the administrator of the state penitentiary off of 129.
Wow. Okay.
off of Cass Street. My cousin's in charge of that. And he asked me one time, do you want to see the kids? He could bring an inmate. And the kids talk about, you don't want to go there. And I said, I don't want, excuse me, I'll be quiet because I'm talking too much. I'm sorry. But I'll be this last thing. And then I told him that if we show kids, inmates from the very communities in which they're coming from, I don't want to say to the kids that this is where you're going to end up.
Right.
Because if the inmate came from the same community, they're saying, what can I do to make that to change? If you bake a pie, you put the same ingredients, you hope the pie come out. The same thing with a kid. If you're telling the kid, if I'm showing a kid, an inmate who's coming from the same environment, same school system, this is where you're going to end up. I said, let me show them some men at different stages of life who come from the same community that could have gone that path but didn't, and they came from the same community, same school system. And so I got a bunch of men and did that instead.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
One of the things I try to do in my classes is because from the literature that I have read and basically looking at the demographic of teachers in this country, it is clear that majority of the teachers are white and female and middle class. And as we said the other time when we were talking about this, the problem with that is there tends to be a disconnect between teachers and students because they see the world in very different ways, vastly different ways. Their expectations, their fears, their aspirations, a lot of things are very different. And so one of the things I try to do is to have, say, you and Rashad coming into the class and talking to my students, and then they see that although that's the demographic of teachers in this country, there are other teachers who come from different demographics and other educators who are successful. So then the question is, why is it that the teaching force is not so diverse? What makes people who come from those underrepresented populations not see themselves as being successful in teaching? And why is it that people also burn out and kind of fade off and don't stop being teachers and so on? So anyway, Rashad, why don't you also chime in with that, with the whole notion of modeling for students and being a sort of a critical educator who is tapping into whatever resources you have?
Yeah, so I've definitely got a lot to say about that. Just based on the conversation that we've had so far.
Yeah.
So for me, my experience going into schools has been tremendous, and it's always been fascinating for me to see how students react to me, and particularly Black students. Two schools that I visited in particular, they had smaller Black populations, but the teachers commented, they were like, "Oh my God, the Black students bum rushed you." Basically, right after right after your presentation. And I was like, I know, because
I've witnessed that.
What'd you say?
I've witnessed that.
Right. I think for them it's kind of gratifying to feel seen and to feel validated that there's there's success in first of all there's success in non-traditional careers. But also that there's somebody who looks like them who's doing that work and is having fun while doing it. And for me, it's like a bittersweet kind of double-edged thing, because I love going into schools, and I love interacting with staff and students. But in the schools where it's like almost only, or oftentimes only, white and female middle class staff populations, I noticed that they tend to underestimate their Black students. And so when I come in, I've often had the comment like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that they had such great questions," or "I didn't know that they were that smart." And I'm like, "What do you mean? These are your students. Like, how can you think that that these students aren't as capable?" So for me, it's kind of like a wake-up call. And also I think is something that might contribute to burnout for POC and Black teachers and staff, because you're not only trying to teach and educate students, but you're also trying to educate Black students. And so when I come in, I've often had the comment like, "Oh my God, I didn't know that they had such great questions," or "I didn't know that they were that smart." And I'm like, "What do you mean? These are your students. Like, how can you think that that these students aren't as capable?" So for me, it's kind of like a wake-up call. And also I think is something that might contribute to burnout for POC and Black teachers and staff, because you're not only trying to teach and educate students, but potentially you're dealing with the bias and internal stereotyping, racism, whatever you want to call it, of your surrounding colleagues. So
Yes.
you know it's a lot, but I personally enjoy connecting with the students and letting them know that these careers are viable and that they're real.
Yes. So you both do all this connectivity with a very personal touch. Eric, one time I've witnessed you in a classroom with your drums, and
Oh, yeah.
also you take on characters, and you have these characters interact with the students, and you sustain that engagement, and the student. It's actually a very rigorous activity because the students are learning, and you make sure that they're learning. But at the same time, you take on this character and you have the drum. Could you just talk about that for a bit?
Okay, and later I'm going to address something that you said to Rashad because it's about burnout. But
Okay. Yeah.
but I might have mentioned this before. One of the things that I try to do is not only I'm cognizant of what I have to teach, my objectives, my assessments, but I also say if I were their age, what would engage me? And I'm not just talking about being a male or female, but 9. Okay, and what can I do also to include what I like to do to get the kids engaged? When I do characters, I'm letting the kids. I don't mind taking risk. I don't mind being silly.
You can laugh at me, kind of thing. Yeah.
You know, and they know what line not to cross because they know the adults in the room. But the main thing is just, and also in talking about pedagogy, you don't want to talk so much, but you want to get them engaged. So when I'm telling a story, when I was learning how to be a storyteller, I was watching storytellers, and the kids just sit down and listen, and the storyteller he or she may keep their voice the same, or they might change their voice. But what helped me, was risky, what helped me was get the kids involved. Let them become the character. They retain more, I found. I said, and when I give them parts, and then they're engaged. So even when whether I'm doing a story, being a character in terms of teaching a particular subject, whether it's social studies or whatever, I have fun, and I make sure that the kids are engaged and that they're getting things. There's ways I'm checking how they're assessing. I might repeat something, and did they get it? Or if I act like I don't know what I said, and then you have to come back. It's all involved. I remember one of my characters, Sir Isaac James, is from the South, talks like this sort of thing. And I told him, my memory's not sharp as it used to be, but and then I'll do like that, and then the kids have to, they think I'm, they enjoy it. But so that's what I do. But I'm gonna go back to something that you asked Rashad about burnout.
Yes.
The thing is, a school, the state sets the tone.
Yeah.
Then it breaks down to the school district sets the tone.
Yeah.
The principal sets the tone, and it all trickles down to the teacher. When we have our what do you call it? Our staff meetings, grade level meetings, I should say. They're breaking down data in terms of this is how the state students scored on this state average, district average, your school, your class, you know, they are breaking it down. That is a lot on the teachers.
Cool.
I would tell teachers today, just concentrate on your classroom, collaboratively work with your other colleagues, see what's working, what doesn't work, and pace yourself. You decide, your principal's going to want certain things. With your group of teachers, what do you want to try to achieve? Your supervisor is going to have certain things to look for. You got to balance it, and you got to pace yourself. Certain things don't have to be graded. Certain things have to, certain things do need to be graded. What is the skill that you definitely want in the short-term and long-term scheme of things within a marking period? And then you have certain individual goals that you have with certain children. Know what you can do and know what you what you can't do, and it's like that serenity prayer. I mean, the things that you can have an impact on, because you can burn yourself out if you don't pace yourself and prioritize what you want to do and how you want to do it.
Right.
And so for you, Rashad, how you bring yourself to this work, we talked about it last time, but just kind of, it bears repeating, I feel. The characters that you write about, these characters are very close to you. They're very personal, right? So yeah, do you mind talking about your characters and how you choose them and that kind of thing?
For sure. So, you know, every character that I create, you know, whether it's for this story or for another one, or even for projects for other people, I'm always putting myself in them. But, you know, for Carefree Like Me, the series that I wrote, it's literally me. It's literally me and my best friend Nina of like 21 years now. You know, she is very logical. She's very like, if this makes sense, then I'll do it, and if it doesn't, then like I'll sit there and I'll overthink it. And me, I'm like, yes, exactly.
I was gonna get my book too, but you already beat me to it.
That is
Great
that is, what did you say?
Eric, what did you say?
No, I said I was gonna get the book too, but you beat me to it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, yes. Because it's very interesting when you say it's totally you and your friend Nina, and I mean, and your friend, and I look at the images, I feel okay. This is actually, it brings it to life. It makes it very alive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's no other way for me to write, and you know, like Amir, or like me, Amir is very hard on your sleeve, lives by his emotions, and can sometimes get derailed because he doesn't think before he acts. So, you know, I figure they balance each other nicely and complement each other, where one might be failing at something, the other one steps in and provides their support, and you know, vice versa. And you know, it was important for me to have two characters of color as well, because it showed that in most hero stories, it's a lot of like white characters saving the day, but I was like, why can't we save ourselves? Like, why can't we be, you know, the heroes in our own story? So I figured that would be a cool kind of element to add into the story as well. So everything about me and my life goes into my work.
So there's a critical consciousness to it. There's also the fact that you're also playing with in the main roles. You're looking at people who are not traditionally seen as the protagonist or the main role. Yeah, even the setting. You're not looking at settings that are very normal. You're looking at very non-Western, non-traditional settings where things are happening in the fantastical realm and magic, but it's still very unfamiliar settings.
Right. Yeah, that was important for me, because I wanted children to feel seen, and I wanted their cultures to feel seen. And I'll never forget the first time I went to what was the name of that school? It was Pace Charter School. I went to Pace Charter School. That was the first school I ever visited. And, you know, the kids were super excited about the story, and they were like, you know, what are these books based on? I'm like, well, they're based on different cultures. So each book deals with a different country and a different culture. And then kids were like, can you do one about Guatemala? Can you do one about India?
Wow.
Can you do one about, like, it was so cool to see kids really excited about seeing themselves and their people represented. So I was like, yeah, why not?
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. And just so that we get it in this recording, if we didn't get it because of the other recording, not sort of cutting out, in the second time when you wrote the second book, you include questions at the end to have people engage with the book. This is something you didn't do in the first book, right? You want to talk about the evolution in your thinking? How did you decide in the second book that, well, I think I gotta make this addition?
Right. So I realized that when parents and educators are working with children, the children will be internalizing it and kind of processing it naturally. But I wanted to kind of take it a step further and be like, well, you know, how do you deal? I wanted them to think deeper about their feelings and to kind of give themselves give themselves freedom to talk about their feelings. And especially, I especially wanted to reach boys who I feel like are not encouraged to verbalize their feelings and
right. You're absolutely right.
And to engage with them. And it's something that even I have struggled with as an adult is verbalizing my feelings.
I like that question right there. How does it help when you're feeling blue? You see that question right there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally all those the questions in the back of the book, all about feelings and that kind of thing.
Exactly. So I wanted students to engage with it in a real way, and for them to really be contemplative and curious about their own emotional landscape.
Yeah. So it turns out that when teachers want to have all these very creative additions to their classroom, and Eric, you can guide us on this. When teachers want to have all these creative additions in their classroom, it turns out that there's a regimented way or a system. Last time we talked about a scriptedness that happens when that kind of seems to bind teachers down to curricula and down to other things. So I remember asking you this question: do you use these kind of books in your classroom? How do you make room in that very busy schedule that you have for some of these extras or some of these additions? Are there even additions?
Yeah, you can I have my current principal I'm working for now. She's awesome. She does understand the importance of teachers expressing themselves, and at the same time, I know she has a mandate to follow as well. But
yes,
you just let her know, and she'll definitely, especially it's going to benefit, the children. She'll definitely work with you, but you just try to fit it in. And you can always add something too. They give you a script, but you can always add to it. And we're not limited in terms of what we can add to certain things. I find the most teachers in elementary school that can be the most creative in kindergarten. I mean, they got to teach kids how to touch stuff, how to paint stuff, how to keep their hands off stuff. But I see some of the most creative lessons when they're teaching young kids, like kindergarten, first grade. I see a lot of creativity there that you may not see with the older grades because of what you want the kids to learn, how to be aware of themselves, be aware of, you want to stimulate them in so many ways, mentally and creatively. So I see a lot of that. Yes, they have their mandate, but I just see a lot of things that they're doing, that I can do, but not to the extent of what they can do. Because there's times I wish I could let a kid take a nap, you just take a nap.
Take a nap and you can't do that. Time out.
Right, you can't do that. Yeah. For the older kids, you can't do that.
Yeah. Just take a nap.
We all need to take a nap.
Right. But that's where I see a lot of creativity can happen.
Okay. And so for you, Rashad, creativity is kind of the name of the game for you, because this is about writing stories and magic and fantasy and things like that. But would you say that, in fact, let me ask the question differently. The last time I asked it, when you are writing, you don't intend to write for teachers to be using the book to teach picture work, to teach awareness and things like that. So as a writer, when you come into a classroom and you see student teachers using your book to sort of do lesson plans and to kind of do phonic instruction and various kinds of literacy competencies, what does that make you think as a writer?
It's always funny to me because, like you said, I'm not sitting in my room thinking like, oh man, this is going to be great for a classroom. I'm very much in this. I'm very much in the space of, if I'm having fun, then that means it's going to be fun for the kid, and for the students, and hopefully for the adults who are reading it to them too. So, for me, I'm going entirely with that mentality. But when I see it being used as an educational tool, it adds another layer of meaning for me, because now it feels like this is fun, but also it's healing and educational for children. And I think one of the best examples of that was when, besides coming into your classroom and having your student teachers kind of use it to develop curricula, was going to going to a book event. It was like an arts fair, and one of the moms bought my a grandma bought my book, and then she texted me later with pictures of her grandson who could barely read, reading it and like turning the pages. She was like, he won't stop having me or his mom or his dad reading this book. Yeah, and you know he was dissecting it. He was looking at every detail of the artwork, trying to understand it from his perspective, and it's just always so cool to know that children's books and picture books are not just pretty or entertaining. They're educational, and kids are building their worldview from them as well.
Yeah, that's actually very good. One of the things that I'm imagining that kid was learning things like concept of print, which is basically when you take a book, how do you open it, how do you hold it upright, where do you see the lines going, and how do you proceed to the next, the following pages? Is it this way or is it that way, and that kind of thing. So books are different, and so these are concepts of print that kids need to learn.
Wow, I never even thought of that.
Yeah. So teachers, literacy teachers like Eric, teach all this stuff to kids, and it's all part of what we end up doing as readers. When you're an adult, you pick up a book and you're reading it, and you bring expectations to the book, and that's part of what we tell the students. You come at the book with your own experiences of, I open it like this, I read from left to right, from top to bottom. If it were Arabic, it would be different. It would be right to left, left to right. Yeah. If it were Japanese or Chinese or other languages, it might be reading going down and not going the other way, and so on. So yeah, there's all this. The materiality of the book is also part of the literacy competence.
Yes.
Getting into.
I also want, with the older grades, I'd want my students to also check out content.
Okay.
I want them to read critically, because we all want the students to think on their own and have a basis. I was reading, when I did teach 5th grade, we were reading about some explorers.
Yes.
And this is at Parkway Elementary School. And one student, I always tell them that, you know, when you read critically, you're looking at, see where people got their sources. And you can determine whether someone has done, you know, you see they use primary sources, secondary sources, and they're presenting the information for you so you can make up your own mind. Or they could be telling you, this is what I think happened based upon the research that I've done and put these things together. But I remember one time we were reading about these explorers, and one student said that, and I can't remember, but I don't remember in detail, but this one, it was two people that were exploring, but one explorer was categorized as a pirate and the other one wasn't. He brought that up. I said, thinking critically. He said, if you didn't read that critically, you would have accepted that someone is a pirate and the other person is an explorer. There's a different mindset when you use those words, a pirate. You know, just certain things come to your mind, and an explorer.
Yeah.
And the student brought that, but if I didn't foster a climate of reading critically, and looking at language and terms, that the student would have, and I gotta also emphasize, discussion is very important when you're talking about a book. When you talk about it, and you talk about, well, I don't think the author meant this, or I don't think the author meant that, or I don't agree with the author.
Yes.
And then you either bring your prior experience or what you just read, why you don't disagree with it. But that conversation is just as important about and comprehending whether it's Rashad's book or any other book, you know.
Yeah. One of the things that I get we talk about, and I think this is a nice connection to that, is the whole notion of representation. And Rashad, you brought this up when you talked about the fact that the kids that are looking at your book, some of them are seeing themselves represented in the books. And so there's this representation, and then there's a sort of a stereotypes that accompany such representation, where some communities or some groups are always cast as the underdog, are always cast as the villains or that kind of thing. And these are subtle messages that students are getting as they're reading about self. That I'm always going to be a villain, I'm going to be a victim, I'm going to be impoverished, I'm going to have limited resources, my life is going to be one of despair, and that kind of thing. So critical reading is part of what we want our students to do. So it's nice that you bring that up, Eric. Have you had any situation where there's been pushback?
There was one situation in my first book with Care for Like Me, Chapter 1,
Yeah.
where it was based on ancient Egyptian culture, and one woman was reading through the book, and then she was like, she said that my drawings basically represented Egyptian stereotype, and so I was like, okay, well, can you explain? And she really couldn't. So I think what she was getting caught up in was the difference between visual cultural markers and then stereotype, because what I drew was pillars with hieroglyphics and kind of like that Egyptian color scheme, which is red, blue, yellow, kind of the primary colors, and had traditional African animals. And so I think she was kind of conflating stereotype with visual markers, which gets complicated for as a visual artist, because one, as a visual artist, my job is to make things clear. And oftentimes it can be very easy to fall into the realm of stereotype. And that was something I was very, very hyper aware of and very nervous about with chapter 2, because it was dealing with the Aztecs. And I was trying not to stereotype Native people with their clothing or with their representation. And I ended up working with a friend who's from Mexico and is very proud of his indigenous heritage, and kind of helped me through certain ideas and working with that. So it's always a dance. It's always a fine line. Yeah, and I used historical representation of what the city of Tenochtitlan actually looked like. So it was a delicate balance of making it clear where this culture was based in, but also trying not to stereotype them. And even still, I think that there are things that I can improve upon. But when I brought it to people who identify as indigenous Aztec and indigenous Mexico, which is their tribal name, or their nation's name, they loved it and they were excited to see themselves. So for me, that was the most gratifying. They were like, "Oh, this is great. I love seeing myself," and they gladly grabbed the art off the wall from my event. So at that point, I felt better. But it's always a very nerve-wracking thing to step into somebody else's culture and say, "I really appreciate it. I love you as a human being. Let me try and honor you, or not honor, but let me try and represent you in a way that's respectful," and then doing so without harming their children.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. Because there's been a lot of historical injustices on indigenous communities.
Right.
Given that the outsiders always come in to gaze at the indigenous and the native, and the outsider has always gone away with the representations of those, and those are the ones that seem to be gaining traction. So you find books being bought about people with all these stereotypical images and representations and caricature sketches.
Right.
Very simplistic in the way they present very complex ecosystems of culture.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I think that's a good navigation that you do in the book. So Eric, how do you navigate these cultural representations in the classroom? Like, have you ever gotten moments where you have to engage with cultural representations and all the stereotyping and that kind of thing?
Well, the school acknowledges the different. The schools, and you can. This is debatable in terms of how much emphasis they want to acknowledge different cultures in the school.
Yes.
We were acknowledging, of course, Black History Month. Hispanic Heritage Month. But we acknowledge Chinese, the new. We school districts acknowledge religious Passover, Ramadan, and Kwanzaa, which some schools try to do that as far as in the curriculum. They try to do that in reading. reading this type of things that are selected for children to read. My school tries to make sure that they touch cultures and stories like that, so we can see where the the importance of, like Rashad was saying, understand the cultures of different people all over the world, and usually by people of that culture that has written them, and we try to acknowledge that in the stories that we have kids read and discuss. And there's times where we will do some background about a particular culture before we get into the book.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I've actually been in your class, Eric, and I've seen, at least when I was in the class, on the walls right up there, you have all these material from various cultures. So it's when students walk into your space, they're understanding that there's a world beyond the Western-centric, the Anglo-centric, the monolingual. That is presented with the material that you have right on the wall of your class.
That's on purpose.
Yes. Good, good. So, speaking of multilinguality and so on, Rashad, do you imagine that some of your books are going to capture some other languages, or maybe be presented in or have characters who? How are you thinking?
Yes. So, I mean, right now, because I don't have like the power of a publisher, it's much harder to try and print editions in English and another language because it's so expensive on my end. And to raise money
to do that,
to raise money to do that is like a full-time job in its own, and I just know that I don't have the energy to do that and then everything else. But I really would love to translate it into their local languages, change the language so that it's maybe not poetry, because translating between poetry into another language is like forget it. But I do speak Chinese, so for the next book, I'm going to have I'm looking to have translations of words written on signs in the back and stuff, so that kids can learn Chinese. So I'm excited for that. And I have a friend, she's from China. I tutor her son in animation and art and stuff.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. She was like, let me know when you're ready, and I'll help you out with anything cultural or like writing wise or whatever. So I'm like, woo woo.
That's good.
Yeah, that is going to be awesome, because we live in a world where globalization is one of the features, which means that there's a lot of intermixing of people and communities and languages. And I think it's always important for one to read material that extends their understanding of the world. So it's not so insular, it's not so constricted and limited to one's spaces of comfort, but moving us beyond those to other spaces where we don't even understand the life that's going on there. But
right.
People live there. The fact that there are people who live there and there's life going on, that's actually one of those things. Like, I mean, do you have any refugee students sort of coming into your classroom, Eric?
I did my first year, my second year teaching in Trenton. We had students from Liberia, I believe.
Yeah.
And they I can't remember the reasons why they were coming in large numbers. We had no records of where they of the school system, or if they worked with the formation of their education, and it was a challenge. I have some funny stories about that, but I'm not going to say it over here. I'll tell you off the record one day. It's going to crack you up. But the main thing is, though, and I'll never forget this. This one student, I believe his name was Ishmael. This student, and it also let me feel how maybe teachers are perceived outside of the United States. This student, Ishmael, hung on to every word I said. I've never seen that kind of respect, that level of respect. And that's my second year teaching. And he appreciated everything I was doing. it was almost it's the type of reverence you see kids give to professional athletes. If there was a problem, say if Rashad was my student and I gave Rashad a problem, he would be working on it. Would not disrespect Rashad and shout the answer. He would wait to see if Rashad knew it, and then he would politely raise his hand and to try to answer it. He went beyond what I would ask a normal kid to do, normal student to do. It was incredible, and unfortunately, he didn't stay with me that whole school year. He had to, because he was living in another area of Trenton, but they wanted him to go to school. This kid called me and asked me if he wanted to stay in my classroom, and I couldn't. If I had the will, if I had permission, I would pick this kid up and take him back and forth to school, but I couldn't. School district wouldn't allow that. But he held to every word I said, and when Rashad talked about respecting the cultures of other kids and or other people where they come from, it's important that I'm glad that he said that, because when you have leaders talking about where kids or families come from different countries and what they're bringing to this country, and then you have other people thinking that they're bringing this negative element, we can have children thinking like that. But when it's coming from adults who are in leadership positions, we got to have books that dispel the stereotypes that some people are perpetuating who have a huge audience than we do.
Right. Right.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. That's deep. That's a very it's actually an important point, because it's all about the critical reading and critical consumption that we've been talking about. Okay, so this is now to wrap it up, so kind of bringing us to the end. And the last question I remember asking last time, which I'm still asking, and I'd like for you to take it first, Eric, and then I'll go to Rashad. So the students who are going to be watching this, these are students who are these are the student teachers, and they are looking for opportunities to learn about how they can connect with students, given that majority of my students come from a demographic that is white, middle class, and female, but they want to teach in ways that are very culturally cognizant. What advice do you have for such students?
What Rashad said earlier, I'm going to echo what he said, is that I'm looking for that quote, because I think that was the latter part of what I said last time. So I'm gonna look for that quote again. But Rashad said that when he was talking about certain kids or certain young teachers had certain expectations that children weren't able to answer certain things, or wouldn't be able to answer certain things, and that took him aback a little bit. No matter, there are going to be certain expectations that teachers may have about the communities which they're going to serve. Because I always felt that as doctors and lawyers and police officers, they have an oath to protect and serve. Doctor said, "I will not do any harm." That's a combination of what a teacher does. They should protect. A lot of times we have to, I grew up with just fire drills, but now we have lockout drills. I mean, a teacher's going to be, if somebody unfortunately gets through, a teacher's going to be the first line of defense, But when we talk about protecting, I always teach students that education is a form of self-defense. If I don't teach you how to read, write, and certain math, somebody's going to take advantage of you. Unfortunately, we have a world that will do that. Yeah. So if I equip you with the understanding of what you need to understand about society, no one can take advantage of you, because a lot of times this is about what's in it for me type mentality in this country. But a teacher should never have low expectations of their students, regardless if they're in an inner city or from another country where they're escaping poverty or whatever. You got to see that you got to look for that light inside of them, and don't let them be defined by their circumstances. Create the circumstances for them to be successful. And so, yes, understand your students individually, as a class, culturally, economically as well. excuse me, but don't let that stop you, because when I worked at Cadwalader, working with a great bunch of teachers, we was, like I said, right across the street from my classroom, gangs would hang out. There was drugs out there. I mean, but we had the best scores in our district and got the governor's award, because the most important asset in the building is not the building itself, it's the people that are in it. You can have the latest technology of all kinds, but if you're not committed to that child and what that child's potential could be, then that child may not realize it through you, because you're going to be the vehicle in which that child realizes what he or she has the potential to become.
Right.
I don't know in my classroom if I have another Rashad Malik Davis, but I'm going to make sure if I see that talent, I'm going to try to bring out him and her so they can see. And if they can't see it, bring a Rashad Malik Davis into my classroom so they can see the possibilities. Wow, he can do it, because Rashad's path to becoming the artist, the great artist that he is, wasn't a straight path. He had bumps and stuff like that. Me being a teacher, I didn't get there like just like high school straight to teacher. You go, I dropped out of school. I did, I did a lot, and I'm gonna bring that to the classroom, and I'm gonna bring that into my experience, and that's gonna drive me more than anything else. Like my mentors understanding what those kids were going through. No, you staying after school. No, I don't need no money. You're staying. I'm calling your parents up, see if they can pick you up. That's that sort of thing, and I do want my students to understand that you have to believe, as Rashad said, you got to believe in yourself. But they're going to first get that validation at a very early age when teachers tell them that. Later on, they may not need it anymore, but you talking about their self-esteem and confidence. But like I told the students in that alternative school that I worked in, where I tell you the kids' parents were, the kids really had a rough background. And then I got them to write a play. I got them to meet the 3 doctors who wrote the book, We Beat the Street and the Pack. And again, I'll end with this here. Dare to be that person that does not accept mediocrity, but embraces the challenges of fulfilling your dreams and potential with a plan that surpasses those who have low expectations of what you can offer the world.
That's good. That's really good stuff. Yeah. So Rashad, the same group of students, you have actually been in some of my classes, so you have a sense of who you're going to be, who is going to be watching this video.
Right.
What advice do you have for them?
I would say that the thing that has sustained me and kept me going has been that I've continuously strived to be authentic to myself and where I'm at in my journey, and always checking in with myself, because I feel like it's very easy to get caught up in everything that you have to do, that you don't take a moment to be like, okay, I have to do that, but what am I, how am I doing? Because I feel like if you don't have yourself, there's really not much left after that to give to other people. So I would say that with regards to career, life, just generally working with children, I feel like always make sure that your well is, and just with anybody really, but always make sure that your well is full and that you're doing the things and being around the people who support you, encourage you, and fill you up, because I feel like when you allow yourself to be depleted by whether it's work or people or anything, and then you don't have something to fill you back up, you start to run on fumes. So that, I think that's my biggest advice to your class, is really to be authentic to where you're at, and to honor that, and to work within that.
Okay, thank you very much. My class has always benefited from the visit by the 2 of you, so I want to say thank you. Rashad, you position yourself as an author and an illustrator and an educator. And that comes through in the way that you're giving advice. Eric, you have a ton of years of experience, and you also are the teacher of the year.
I earned this silver here.
You are the teacher of the year, so there's so much to learn from you.
Yeah.
So
It's always an honor that you asked me and Rashad to come. We enjoyed very much, and I hope the students are getting a lot from us because we enjoy giving it to them.
All right. Okay. Good. Good. So this is great. I like that. I'm gonna say that I'm happy that the technology should always work, but it's good it didn't, because then we got to reconnect the second week.
Exactly. Exactly. But before we disconnect, I wanted to show you and your class something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
With regards to Carefree Like Me. So I've been teaching myself how to animate. And
wow, I can't wait to see this.
And I animated Amir saying, "Hey." So give me 1 second.
Ooh.
Okay. By the way, while Rashad's pulling up, the governor said schools will be closed at least till May 15th.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty much the rest of. Okay. Let's see.
Can you guys see my screen?
I can see your screen. Yeah.
I can see. Yeah, I can see if I can make it. Oh, there it is.
Oh. Okay.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's see if I can get it. It'll do it again. All right, here we go.
Hey.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So it's super easy. I mean, it's super short, but it took me all day.
At least you're not doing those clay things where you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
That takes forever to make a movement and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
See what you do when you're at home. You got time.
Yeah. You can
I
get.
better be better on this flute by the time I get to those kids, man. So
Yeah.
I understand. That's great, Rashad. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. Amir's coming to life.
All right, I can't wait.
Yeah, coming alive. So this means that at some point you could even have this animated. You could have an animation on your website that kind of supports the books, so that people read the books, but then they can go back to your website and look at the animations and things.
Exactly. I'm working with 2 friends now. We're working on a pilot episode, and we're gonna submit it and see if we can get it picked up somewhere. So
nice. Yeah. Well, okay, good.